Now, on our second lead story today, armed conflict in African states, with the most recent one being South Sudan, has been a reference point at the ongoing Arms Trade Treaty Conference in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, in an earlier statement, Britain, Germany, France, and the United States were lambasted for failing to maintain to the treaty through their arms sales to countries embroiled in conflict.
Ukraine has, for example, been criticized by Amnesty International for exporting 830 light machine guns and 62 heavy machine guns to South Sudan in 2014, only 6 months after the ratification of the famous Treaty on Arms Trade. We therefore ask ourselves if this ratification had a concrete impact on the actions of member states. This is exactly the question we ask Mr. Aymeric Elwin of Amnesty International, joining us from Geneva, Switzerland. You notice that some states who are part of the treaty have delayed to implement it. Does the difficulty come in reconciling economic interests and human rights?
Le traité, pour la première fois, opère un changement de paradigme dans la communauté internationale. Pour la première fois, un traité vient dire.
Actually, the answer is in the treaty. First, the treaty operates a paradigm change in the international community. For the first time, a treaty says that states must balance their economic interests, geopolitical interests, etc., and the protection of the civilian population. These civilians are the first targets in the transfer of weapons, and they are also the first victims. When countries export, they must evaluate, for instance, when they sell the guns, if there is a risk of serious violations of human rights in the receiving country. From the moment they do not do this assessment and are not transparent in their transactions, it will be impossible to know whether the implementation of the treaty is correct. So the civil society, legislators have a role to play in putting pressure on states to be transparent on how to implement it. Today we should only have suspicions and presumptions of violations and transfers, contrary to what needs to be done. We continue to see transfers to countries that commit war crimes. And then, Mr. Aymeric, the exporting countries, can they put pressure, or rather, do they have the means of putting pressure on the buyers on the responsible use of the weapons? After signing, they adhere to the treaty, accept to be legally related to ensure the protection of the population and of irresponsible illegal transfers. First, the international community has a responsibility, especially those who export weapons and are permanent members of the Security Council. The United States, Russia, France, the United Kingdom have this imperative obligation to sensitize states that the weapons that serve to commit war crimes, genocide, or against humanity should not be heard of. We notice that almost 2 years after the entry into force of this treaty, countries continue to sell weapons to member countries of the coalition, led by Saudi Arabia, who have intervened in Yemen when the crimes are committed by this coalition. Egypt is also there. Recently, we denounced the member states of the European Union's complicity in the repression by Egyptian authorities against opponents.
Well, thank you very much, Aymeric, for joining us on the morning call.